There was this insanity about toys all of a sudden, always at Christmas time, so it seemed like a perfect, relatable idea.
It began with a toy being manufactured, and I was hooked right there.
With those two people being on a set and working with us every day, I thought that we could come up with an extraordinary movie.
It's hard to believe that everything my father used to yell at me about, sitting around reading comic books, watching TV, would lead to a pretty decent career. But as it turned out, that's the way it was.
There's a fantasy and a suspension of belief that that you can go into that world, and as a kid, there's almost believe it because the way these characters are developed.
The primary attraction of comic books, especially superhero titles to kids, is it gives them a sense of empowerment. They are not weak, they are not trod upon. They are the people who rescue those in mortal circumstances. And that's how kids want to see themselves. Basically, we were trying to find an amalgam of all the things that we liked about every superhero and smash them together and make Turbo Man that idea.
And the boomerang shooter, and the rock and roll jetpack, and the realistic voice activator that says 5 different phrases, including "It's Turbo Time!"
Some of that was developed in script, some of it was probably developed as Brian worked with designers. It also had to do with storyboarding some of the action sequences and figuring out, okay, what do we need for this particular sequence? Well, a boomerang would work great, so okay, let's use a boomerang. Some of it came from Tim Flattery, who is a comic book artist kind of person.
I'll sit down with the director and producers, and we'll just conceptualize, what does he look like? What does he need to do? In Turbo Man's case, well, he's got to fly, he needs a jetpack. So I'll sit down and work with them just in rough sketches to begin with, going over ideas like how his jetpack might work, you know, how that mechanism might work, what the overall look is. Is there a big T across his chest?
Turbo Man went through a number of, I think originally he was called Turbo Tom, which was a funny name. We went through millions of names. I know everybody loved the name Turbo.
You know, the Turbo, or the Turbo Guy, you know, what a million different variations on this before we selected Turbo Man and then cleared the name.
And once things start to click, then I'll start to refine my artwork. Then we get a little closer to the final look. Once we have it nailed, which you can see in some of my sketches, they start to get tighter, and then I'll do finished renderings so that things are described enough to build from.
With 1 foot standing on a building, hands on hips, protecting the city, flying through the air, vents and flashing lights so he would be seen at night, streaking through the sky, and take all those things together, and it really worked for everybody. And then came the hard part of translating a painting, a drawing, into something that could actually be worn.
Look, it's Turbo Man and Booster!
Turbo Man is a Turbo Man show, and Turbo Man was a guy called Dan Reardon who looks nothing like Arnold and is much taller and leaner. So we also had to do a whole separate suit for Dan.
Arnold's and my suits were essentially the same suit. I'm a little taller, he's a little broader, bigger.
Not only were we creating the star of a kid's TV show, but we were also creating a character for Arnold Schwarzenegger, the biggest action hero star in the world. And so there were so many different design considerations. The most important, that he be an iconic-looking superhero and that he's identified immediately as a great superhero.
We kind of thought, well, we'll just take like a tight body stocking and we'll just put it on him, because he still had an incredible body. But when you put the body stocking on him, his body went away. Suddenly he just looked like a big guy in a tight shirt, but you didn't see any muscle definition.
So we do a plaster wrap body cast of him.
You're almost not able to breathe, where you cannot inhale, where you feel really constrained, constricted, claustrophobic when they put this on.
They had these plaster gauzes that are heat sensitive. Once you wet them, they start to get very warm and then they harden. They had baths, plastic, like small bathtubs set up, and they had all these strips laid out, all ready to go. And they had 5 guys actually, one guy to wet the strips and hand them to the different guys, and 4 guys at once were putting these things on. You stand on a little pedestal, and then they just wrap you as fast as they can. And then you've got to stand there for, I think it's like 15 or 20 minutes. You've got to stand as still as possible and let that thing solidify.
But being the guy he is, it was a piece of cake. He's a complete professional. We did the body cast, set that up, and then start sculpting the suit on top of his body so that it fits him perfectly. So we sculpted the suit out of Levant clay, get the design to the point where Brian can come in, take a look at it, and see the direction it's going in real life.
Well, just so...
Right on top of the pecs, you mean?
I mean, just look at his natural guy. Right in here, he's got a big muscle. We're not expressing that.
Okay. No, I have to say, I think it looks pretty
in here, and it's making him look narrow, though.
And then once we finish the sculpture, we mold it, do different molds of that, and do foam latex injections of all the parts. Then we have kind of foam parts of the Turbo Man suit. And from there, a bodysuit's sewn up over Arnold's body again and put back on his body cast. That all gets embedded into the spandex.
It was a little goofy in the beginning, but when Arnold got into that suit, you know, he's the ultimate superhero without a suit. So seeing him in it, you know, was pretty great.
Oh, I thought it was beautiful. I mean, it's a gorgeous suit, and you know, as usual, all this attention was paid to like comic book details.
Tim Flattery, who guided this from concept to finished product every step of the way. And I remember the first time that we brought a finished suit.
Brian was so busy, he's in the middle of shooting a movie. I had no, you know, we had 2 seconds to talk. And then they wrapped out, and I went back to my hotel room. I was leaving the next day, and he called me. And he said, "That's the best suit I've ever seen in any movie." And to hear that, you know, it was like, that made the world right. And I was ready to spend the 3 months shooting it.
Ready and action.
I put it on, I was Turbo Man. I mean, the rest of it was like, you know, he'd hired me to do the superhero voice and the chin and whatever, so we had that going already. But when you put on the suit, you're pretty heroic. I mean, look at it, it's gorgeous. It's like, you know, I should look so good. As an actor, you do different things to help you with your character. Me, personally, costume is huge. I can almost not even really know what I'm gonna do and then put on the costume or the makeup or a wig or whatever, a hat, and I know where I'm at.
Drop your weapons and release the first family, you twisted madman!
Who are you? Are you the guy? Huh? Oh, thank God. Hey, we got him, people!
Turbo Man standing there doing nothing. You thought, come on, Turbo Man, fly, use your jetpack. And then he'll pop.
Hop up, press the buttons, the things come up, and then this is roaring, the engines are going.
And it's turbo.
It's turbo time! And then just go out, okay. Whenever you do a stunt, it's gonna be uncomfortable. That's why they call it stunt. You know, it's dangerous, it's uncomfortable, it's tedious work.
There were a bunch of suits. I mean, we had suits for stuntmen, we had suits for doubles. The suits, you know, took a beating.
3, 2, 1, action!
So I had to design the suit to be shot practically. So everything had to work on it. Once the jetpack was designed, that had to be designed where it could deploy itself, actually had working flames that came out of it. And we had to take in consideration that Arnold's wearing this thing, and you know, we're not gonna burn him to death.
That's a practical consideration. And also, where does the jets emit from? And so we came up with the fact that this engages.
On the wrist gauntlets, the controllers for the jetpack were telescoping. So they would be hidden inside the gauntlet, and when you hit the button, they would telescope out into perfect position right into the palm of his hand.
And he presses a button, and whoosh, They open up and they fire on all 4 cylinders here, and it's up, up, and away.
And the flames would ignite at different levels. And bright enough to see on film and powerful enough to look like they have thrust.
Isn't it amazing how fast those things go? I love it. This is really fun.
I have a special delivery for you. Huh?
Also, we had the turbo discs that he would fire most effectively right at the camera. And that was a practical utensil there. Those were built so that the piece on the arm had to accommodate that equipment in order to actually shoot turbo discs out and to fire them manually so that you have a control on the bottom of your palm.
Underneath was a track that shot these discs, and you literally, it was cool. You know, they came right out of your glove, and you did this great disc shoot.
The turbo ring he would pull out, and Tim Flattery designed it so that it would open up on a spring and be ready to throw.
That was just a simple mechanism on a hinge that he pulled out, and he would just hold it on one side and flick it open, which is kind of funny because we went through a couple of them on set. When the time came where he had to use the turbo ring, the first time he grabbed it, it kind of, you know, he opened it up and it would just break in half and it ended up hitting the ground. We went through a few of those before we got it to work.
And we would throw it, and usually there'd be a couple of people there with a blanket. So you threw it into a blanket, and they'd catch it because those things were expensive. And if it broke, well, you know, you only got a limited number of those things.
And those are all practical working mechanisms that today, a lot of that stuff, 90% of that stuff I just described would be done in CG, whereas when we did the movie, we built it all practical, and it worked. A big consideration was being able to incorporate a flight harness on him.
And that often involved old-fashioned ways. The best way to have someone fly is to put them in a flying rig, meaning that underneath their wardrobe, that they're wearing a harness with picks so you can put wires, sometimes as thin as piano wires, and suspend them from cranes, and then hang them off travelers so that they can move across at a certain speed. And this is not easy, and it's dangerous. I got that feeling when I noticed that every time we did flying work, there was an ambulance present.
One of the biggest challenges was the flying element because I'm afraid of heights. So I was in a 50-foot crane. And then when they bring you up, they wind you up like zip. You know, it's like, okay, hey, it's gonna be wham. You're like, whoa, 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 whoa. You know, then they kind of realize, oh, where I'm at with it, then they slow it down. And they're very accommodating, but in the beginning, because it doesn't faze them at all, and they know you're safely rigged, so zip him up. Yeah.
The agony of all this harness and the stunts and the flying around and banging around and hurting yourself and all this kind of thing.
You'll come home, it looks like someone just knocked you with a hammer, like on both arms and your hips where the pivots are. You know, a lot of times you don't realize it, and it's riding up, it's cutting into your groin and cutting off the circulation to your legs, and what we do for art, you know. But then Brian would say, Dan, do it again. I'd say, gladly, for you, sir.
But the key thing is, again, and that is that you think not about the harness and, oh my God, how tight this is and how uncomfortable this is, but about the end result.
I'd say, you know, aren't these killing you over here? And, man, isn't it hot in there? And he's like, never complain, never explain. And then he just like walks away, you know. He leaves you with these little pearls. I'm like, I'm using that on my next date.
I can be in a harness for hours. You will never hear a complaint from me because it doesn't matter how we get there, how much torture it really is. What really matters is that it will be a wonderful movie, and you see me flying around as this turbo man from left to right, up and down.
What the movie was about, that you don't want to fail your kids. You want to be a hero for them. And that is what made the transformation of Howard Langston into Turbo Man and finally becoming a hero to his son. That's what made it all work.
You always worry when you make a movie, is it in 10 years, are we going to be embarrassed? Are people going to still care? Are they still going to like it? And This movie has held up, I think, really well.
It's always fun to be part of something that becomes a bit of Americana, you know, or a bit of the zeitgeist of pop culture. That you can participate in that in any way is neat. It's not political, it's not violent, it's not, you know, nasty in any way. It's like, it's fun. I can't say it enough. If kids are liking what you did and they're excited by it, then everything was worth it.